From ancient archaeological sites, lost burial sites, and strange stone fears, there are some archaeological discoveries that are hard to decipher. Stay tuned to number 1 to find out the most mysterious, unsolved archaeological discovery and how it still puzzles archaeologists today. Number 5. Death of Alexander the Great and his final resting place. Alexander III of Macedon, also known as Alexander the Great, was a Greek military leader who led the Greeks in an invasion of Persia and India in the 4th century BCE. After an intense military campaign, Alexander finally died in Babylon at the age of 32. But his death throws into question 2 mysteries. First, how did he die? And second, where is his body today? There is much speculation around the cause of his death, and since archaeologists don't have a body to autopsy, they have to rely on the primary accounts from the time. One theory is that he was poisoned. This is mentioned in a number of primary sources like works by Diodorus and Justin. However, not all are convinced by this, such as the Greek author Plutarch, who dismissed the idea that Alexander was killed in a poisoning as a likely conspiracy and fabrication. The main argument against the poisoning theory is the time that passed between Alexander falling ill and his death 11 days later. More recent arguments have suggested that Veratrum album, a white hellebore plant, could have caused the delay in death. Nevertheless, as with any mystery, there is always more than one theory floating around, and others have attributed his death to natural causes, such as malaria or typhoid fever. Until someone finds his final resting place, and hopefully enough of his body to conduct a scientific investigation, archaeologists will simply have to use the evidence available to argue for or against different theories. But why don't we know where his body is? We should probably call this number 5.5, as it's really a question all of its own. Initially, as one would expect of a great leader, his body was laid to rest immediately after his death and was visited later by rulers like Julius Caesar and Augustus. But in the centuries after his death, the body was moved on 2 occasions and later lost from the archaeological and literary record. According to the literary evidence available, his body was laid to rest in a gold sarcophagus and was on its way to Macedon when it was seized by Ptolemy, one of Alexander's successors, and temporarily taken to Memphis. Later, Ptolemy II moved the sarcophagus to Alexandria, where it remained until Ptolemy IV replaced the sarcophagus with a glass one and used the original one to create coins. His tomb in Alexandria was open to the public until, for unknown reasons, it was closed by Emperor Septimus Severus. After this, its fate is unknown. Some believe the so-called Alexander sarcophagus, housed in the Istanbul Archaeological Museum, contained Alexander's remains, but this idea has since fallen out of favor, and his body and final resting place still remain a mystery. Hopefully one day in the near future, archaeologists, or even an enthusiastic metal detector, might unearth the final resting place of Alexander the Great, and this archaeological mystery will finally come to an end. Number 4. Linear A, Minoan language. Mainly associated with the island of Crete in the Mediterranean, Linear A is a form of writing that remains undeciphered. Inscribed on clay tablets, it is believed to be the origin of the later Linear B script that was successfully decoded in the 1950s. Unfortunately, although both writing systems contain some similar symbols, archaeologists have been unable to decipher Linear A. Nevertheless, just because you don't know what something says does not mean that you can't investigate it. And this is exactly what archaeologists have done. Dated 2500 to 1450 BCE, the writing style overlapped with another style known as Cretan hieroglyphic writing, and examples have been found mainly on Crete, but also some on the Aegean Islands and on mainland Greece. Although some archaeologists believe they contain palace or religious writings, until some bright spark manages to decipher the mysterious writing, we will just have to guess what the writing contains. Number 3. Stone spheres of Costa Rica. Locally known as Las Bolas Grandes, or the Great Stone Balls in Spanish, these mysterious stone spheres are located on the Diqui Delta and the Isla del Cano in Costa Rica. One notable archaeological site where they've been found is Palmar Sur, on the southern part of Costa Rica. Dating between 300 and 800 CE, the area appears to have served as a multifunctional site with a settlement, cemetery, monumental architecture, and sculptures. It also contains over 300 petrospheres, which create three puzzling questions. What was their function? How were they created? And where did the material come from? As with many of these ancient megaliths and sculptures, the exact function of these spheres remains a mystery. Some believe they are grave markers, while others believe they might have been a form of money. But it's not just the function that's mysterious. How did their makers manage to create such perfect spheres? Even in today's age, with significant advances in tools and techniques, it is still remarkably difficult to craft flawless spheres from stone by hand. Unfortunately, the exact method used to craft them is unknown, but some artisans believe they are some of the finest examples of precision stone carving in the ancient world. Even if archaeologists manage to determine why and how they were created, it still leaves the question, where did the creators get the granite from? While the nearest source found is many miles away, it doesn't show any signs of quarrying, which begs the question, where did the material come from? With so many unanswered questions, archaeologists will likely never know the true function behind these stones, and it is possible that they will remain a mystery for years to come. Which is always a good thing, as it keeps the archaeologists busy. Number 2. Gobekli Tepe, Turkey. Situated about 760 kilometers above sea level in the southeastern Anatolia region of Turkey, Gobekli Tepe is an archaeological site dating back between the 10th and 8th millennium BCE. Its existence was first noted during a survey conducted in 1963. However, archaeologist Peter Benedict mistook the only parts of the site above ground at the time to be stone slab grave markers. An easy mistake to make if you aren't familiar with local sites. And it wasn't until archaeologist Klaus Schmidt came across a description of the stone slabs and subsequently began excavating the site in 1994 that the true scale of the discovery was known. If Klaus didn't stumble across that description of the site, it's possible that it could have remained misinterpreted for years to come. Schmidt's excavations found two distinct phases of use. The earliest phase dated back to the 10th millennium BCE, making it the oldest known megalithic structure in the world. In an unprecedented display of ability, this part of the site was made up of about 20 circles of more than 200 massive T-shaped pillars. Slightly less grand, the second phase consisted of smaller pillars that stood in rectangular rooms with polished lime floors. For unknown reasons, the site was abandoned after the pre-pottery Neolithic B period, which ended just over 8,000 years ago. Like with any good mystery, this site leaves archaeologists scratching their heads. With some of these pillars weighing between 10 and 20 metric tons, how did they lift the massive blocks, let alone transfer them from the quarry to the site? Well, archaeologists believe it would have taken about 500 people to move the stones, which is a lot of people considering humans didn't live in big groups at the time. And that also brings up more questions than it answers. Why did so many people group together to create the site? Well, unfortunately, the exact function of the site remains a mystery. But after excavating the site, Schmidt believed it to be a pilgrimage destination that attracted worshippers from up to 100 miles away, a considerable distance to walk, especially remembering that the wheel wasn't invented until 3500 BCE. But who were these people, and what did they believe that made them create such a massive structure? One which clearly would have taken a lot of effort to build. Luckily, Schmidt had an answer for this as well: a cult of the dead. Although no tombs or graves were found, Schmidt believed they lay undiscovered, and ironically it wasn't until after his death that evidence to support his theory was found. Only recently, in 2017, a human crania with incisions was found, interpreted as evidence of a Neolithic skull cult. Even if you accept Schmidt's theory for why it was created and what it was used for, that still leaves the question, how did they move the blocks and who exactly built the structure? Number 1. Stonehenge, England. Situated in Wiltshire, in the southern region of England, Stonehenge has puzzled travelers, local inhabitants, and archaeologists for centuries. Although parts of the site date back to about 3000 BCE, the site underwent several major modifications over a span of 2,000 years before finally falling into disuse. However, unlike other archaeological sites, parts of it have always been above ground, and written reference to this site dates back to 1130 AD, and this has resulted in numerous theories as to what it was used for. Today, the site is most famous for its astronomical alignments, with thousands of people flocking to the site to celebrate the summer and winter solstices. Even today, after centuries of investigations, archaeologists still debate why it was originally created, by whom, and for what purpose. With several modifications throughout its use, it is no simple task to answer these questions, and archaeologists have come to the conclusion that it was a multifunctional site that was used for different reasons at different times. Popular theories for its function range from a burial site, a UFO landing site, an astronomical calendar, all the way to a ritualistic temple or altar. Also, recent archaeological investigations suggest it was part of a much larger archaeological site that contains numerous ancient structures, which again poses even more questions than it answers. So many mysteries surround this site. Why was it originally built? Why was it continuously developed? Who built it? Where did the material come from, and how did they transport them? When it comes to how they built it, it is worth mentioning that some of the stones, known as blue stones, originated from a quarry 140 miles away in Wales. Now, these stones weighed about 2 tons. How did they move them? Some believe they may have been used in other monuments nearby and then dismantled and brought to Wiltshire, while others believe they could have been brought to the site directly from the quarry. Regardless of which theory you believe, the next question becomes, how did they move them? Did they move them over land by placing them on wooden rolling pillars? Or did they manage to create a boat strong enough to hold their weight? Unfortunately, even though archaeologists have tried to replicate the method, they haven't been successful so far, and remains one of the most significant mysteries surrounding the site. Overall, so much remains unanswered about Stonehenge, and with the continuous discovery of new sites and finds, this site is likely going to puzzle archaeologists for years to come, which is likely a good thing, as everybody enjoys a good mystery. Tell us what you think about Stonehenge and other sites in the comments below. Also, don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more interesting information. Catch you next time!